Gloucester's greatest asset is probably its history. It's existed for a long, long time. Many significant events have taken place within its walls, and life still pulses strongly within its boundaries today. I'm not a historian, and my project isn't about providing historically accurate information. I'm a music producer, and so, in my search for a muse, I've become inspired by the cultural heritage of Gloucester. Architecture, people, stories and events that have shaped and continue to shape my adopted home, and now shaping the music I make. This film documents my musical ventures with a bunch of really talented people in 8 different special places found in the centre of Gloucester. Okay, the first one was The Quietness of Stones, and it's in St Mary de Crypt. And we'd managed to get in there just before the renovation work. They've been renovating for a year, and it was all dusty and dark, and the electricity had knackered the lights, so you turn the switch on and the lights would blow. So I got loads of tea lights, and I got my team of volunteers to light about 500 tea lights, and it was really cold. You could see your voice, water vapour from your voice when you spoke or sang, and it was really magical. It was the first session, and it really set the bar high. We had a few technical gremlins, but in the end we had a really good few rehearsals, and it was the first time we'd all come together. We had a scratch choir. So we did this one take and recorded it, and I had this big smile on my face, and it went really well. So that was the first session.
Sometimes the quietness of stone softens the air around you. Sometimes, while the stones breathe out around you, you put your palms flat to the wall and breathe in cool, holy stillness. Sometimes your feet fall lightly and easily, taking you away from the trodden path into this thin place, this long memory from more ancient space. This place remembers you. Sing me the song again, while the stones breathe out around me, speaking of calm solidity. I thought of stone, and my body stilled. I felt my feet on stone, and my being stilled. I leant my back against the stone and the support of eons. Sing me the song again, while the stones breathe out around me. Sometimes you need cold solidity of stone to remember your inherent place in the order of things.
Okay, second session is about Athelflaed. She's this Anglo-Saxon warrior queen, and she was buried in St Oswald's Priory 1100 years ago. And we recorded this one in the Tower, which is in the centre of Gloucester. And we know that Athelflaed was really fond of Gloucester. She re-established all the Roman network of roads, and basically turned it into a proper town at the time. And she also built St Oswald's Priory, which is where she's buried. It's a ruin now. Well, in terms of the song, there's a lot of history to sort of record in the song, and I asked my friend Dave, who's a rapper and a poet, to write the verse for it, and he did a really good job. And it kind of brings the whole story of Athelflaed to life in a modern way, using hip hop. There's a little bit of jazz and there's a little bit of folk music in there. And the Tower is a really good space for recording drums. So I want to get back in there and do that again sometime.
In the days of hand-forged blades on the battlefield, the power struggle for Mercia yields. Blood spilled to mud, what once was real was weaponized beehives and boiling vats of beer. Throne of the kingdom was Alfred's, and fears of a godless army was hanging in the air. Heathens carried by the waves soon appeared. Danish warriors, axes and spears, strike at the overlord's fortress and shields. War waged on as days turned to years. Children were born to this conflict and steered the pathways of history these lands are dear to. Soon to be king named Edward was reared. Just one sibling born beat him here, who after a tactical marriage reappeared as the widow of Nichnaclafed Ethelflaed. Icanlachliha, queen before queens, a founding mother on the chessboard of kings. Ethereal whispers of skins and strings sing within God-given murmurs and ring through actions as plans were mapped out to bring the bones of St. Oswald back from the Vikings. Thoughts of them soaring on angelic wings in the minds of followers and warriors during attempt at reprisals, assuring the sure thing of victory, battling on fields of Woden. Fixed up the old and built on the Roman ruins, replenishing what become broken. 1,000 years past, millennia flows. She's still remembered in lyrics and prose. Remains are resting in Gloucester, her soul scribed to the history of stories told. Lady of Mercia, tales of her actions spanning a millennia. Passed on the power, widow was Alfred's firstborn daughter. Took to the path that was plotted before her, adopted the tactics of war from her mother. Saga eclipsed by her husband and brother. These words were written for her founding mother.
Okay. So the Guildhall is somewhere where I've worked and spent a lot of time for the last 15 to 20 years. I moved to Gloucester in 1999, and one of the first places I visited was the Guildhall, and I got to know the staff there, and I've done all sorts of different projects there. And although it's by far the youngest building, it has a heritage of music making going back years. Originally, it was a ballroom, then it became council offices, and then it eventually, 40 years ago, became an arts centre. And they've had a program of live music for decades, and many famous bands have played there. Radiohead come to mind, Oasis, Muse, and loads. Eliza Carthy, lots of different very well-known artists have played there. And I really like the idea of the project gently and quietly sticking itself in that chronological timeline of different people that have made music there. Yeah, Guildhall's a very special place. I invited a scratch choir again, and a whole bunch of musicians, and we did it very much like a standard band: bass, drums, guitars, keyboards. And the song itself is it's the one which kind of puts into words a lot of my core values and almost religious, spiritual beliefs. It's about love. So I'll let the song do the talking for itself. But it was really important to have a bunch of my friends sing on it, and I'm really proud of this one.
Brings me
So there's a chap that lived. He was born in the 18th century and he died in the 19th century, called Jemmy Wood, and he was known as the Miser of Gloucester. And this song is based on him and some of the stories and tales that are told about him. So where McDonald's is on Westgate Street, that's where his bank was. So next time you visit McDonald's, you can get a bit weirded out by the idea that this guy, the Miser of Gloucester, lived there. And the myth is that Charles Dickens was inspired by this Jemmy Wood character. Ebenezer Scrooge, who's in the Christmas Carol, Jemmy Wood was the inspiration for him. So I looked at some of the stories about Jemmy Wood and I put them into song. Specifically, he used to go down to the docks area and he'd pick up the coals off the back of the coal merchants' carts that had fallen on the roadside. And this guy was the richest person in England at the time. He was just a right miser. So he'd pick up these coals, put them in his pockets and go home and put them on his fire, when he could have just probably bought the coal merchant's business, so yeah, it kind of, yeah, he's really prominent in Gloucester's history. So the song in itself, I'm really proud of this one. It's got a touch of Neil Young and Amy Mann, and it's the one where I pretty much wrote this one all on my own with a little bit of help from Jenny, my poet friend, on one of the verses where I was struggling a bit, and I finished it at 4 a.m. one morning, and yeah, I was pleased with that.
Picking up pieces of coal and dropping them into my pocket, wiping my hands down my shirt. Yeah, lost another piece of my soul. I have no problem, you see, with a wealth of 900,000, more than one man should be proud of. Pick up another little piece of coal. Riches under wraps, rich dark things I hide. Witness the public throwing stones and my dead muscle, skin and bones in a coffin on a hearse in Southgate Street. Riches under wraps, rich dark things I hide. Witness the public throwing stones and my dead muscle, skin and bones in a coffin on a hearse in Southgate Street. I got beaten for pulling up roots. They didn't know I was the master. Said I looked like a vagrant disaster, not the owner of a turnip plot. What became of my gold? Was I the inspiration for a seasonal Dickens creation and a fill pot with my profile?
So in Gloucester, there's a building called Blackfriars, which is an old Dominican friary, and within that complex there's a scriptorium, and that's where the monks would illuminate religious texts. So I thought about it, and I came up with the idea that I wanted to write a song with a narrative about a monk who was involved in doing illumination and calligraphy. And I mentioned it to a few of the team, and Eloise, the project artist, said, "Do you know about Pangaban?" I was like, "No, I don't know about Pangaban." And she showed me this poem. It's actually a translation from the original Irish. And I read through the poem, and it's this great story about this white cat, Pangaban, who belongs to a monk who's an Irish monk in the 9th century. And it's all about his work doing the calligraphy and the illuminations, and contrasting it with the work of the cat who's busy catching mice around the wherever he is making his illuminations. It's a really great poem. So I gave it to Emma, who's the lead singer on it, and said, could you scan, I've got some music, could you rewrite the lyrics and of the poem and scan it so that it works as a song? So she went away and did, she managed to do about 3 of the first verses of this poem. And then I gave it to Shane with Emma's contribution. And then Shane was able to write just off the top of his head. He's a writer, so he's great at doing that. Some really great verse that complemented what Emma had done. And then by that time, we kind of felt that it was pretty much what we needed. So, and that's how it all came about, that one. I think it's a pretty special place as well. Yeah, that one's a good one.
I and Pangaban, my feline friend, busy through the night, hunting words I write, while he hunts mice. Try to make amends with book and pen, plying with our skills, bearing no ill will, till all is still. Till all is still. What a sight to see, how glad we are when we sit and find something for our minds.
So we had to think about recording in the cathedral. It's the obvious place for my project to happen. And the place in the cathedral where there's a grand piano is the chapter house, which is just off the cloisters. And I've walked around the cathedral and the nave, and actually comparing it to the sound in the chapter house, I think the chapter house is probably the best place we could have done what we did for this next song. The next song's an instrumental, and it's written by one of my favourite collaborators, Alice. And she's a cello player and a really great composer. And I asked her, could you write a piece for 2 cellos and a piano accompaniment, and make the piano part really simple because I'll have to play it. So she went away and did that. And prior to this project, I've met a guy called George Schilling. So he's got a really good background in the music industry. He's a producer and he has his own studio in the Cotswolds, but he also plays cello quite well. And I'd met him and got on really well with him. So I gave him a ring and said, look, I need another cello player. Are you up for it? And he agreed, which was great because he brought his microphone that he uses, which is the same as my favourite microphone. So we had those 2 lovely microphones, one for each cello. So that was a little bonus. And the great thing about this track is Chris, who did the video, he was part of the performance because he had to do choreography for his own filming, because I'd asked him, I wanted it done in 1 take. And on the film, you can't really, it isn't 1 take, the filming, but there's very few edits, and he's done a really great job. And the sound in there, those 2 cellos and the piano, just really brilliant. It's the simplest piece of the collection, and it's done in this. Oh, it's just great. It's probably my favourite. So there's one song in the collection, and I deliberately made it a little bit uncomfortable to listen to. It's got distorted beats on. It's got grime rapping at the end. It's got an angry poet singing about immigration, and I've juxtaposed it with a 4-part choral singing, and then there's some piano parts, and it took a lot of compromise to do it as well, because I involved Josh, who's the recording engineer for most of the project, and I knew that he was a musician. I knew he's really talented and really creative, so I asked him, said, do you want to collaborate on it? So he brought his duo Bast, which is him and his friend Beth, who's the vocalist, and he does all the electronics, and I gave him samples of some piano parts that I'd written and some string parts, and we met together and we chatted about the song, and then they went away, took that away, and Beth went away and wrote lyrics. And then when we met, he'd taken my piano parts and string parts and changed them into this kind of distorted, really sort of tense piece of music with one drone note in the bottom. So I went with it on the day of the session, and they did a really good performance. And the choir did a really good performance, the 4-part choral group, and the grime artist at the end, Grizz, he did some really good bars at the end to kind of pull it all together and sum it up at the end. And then when I got it into the studio, I listened to it and I thought, I've lost my piano parts and my original kind of structure of chord sequence. So I kind of reinstated that and I sent it out, and Josh was like, oh, it doesn't sound like it's ours anymore. And I was like, oh no. So I had to then go back and kind of put my bits in and keep the structure, but then also keep his distorted beats and the fact that it's old traditional kind of choral 4 parts with grime and techno, and it's about immigration, and the process of doing the production was difficult because I felt I had to compromise a bit on what Josh obviously had a vision for what he wanted, because he's used to doing that. He's normally in control of his own productions, but it's my project, and on the day, the 4-part choir were in one part of the church, and the Josh and Beth and Grizz were one part, and they're very cool, but they didn't really talk to each other. So it was an awkward thing, and I got a bit down around that time as well. So it was really I wanted it to be uncomfortable as part of the sort of collection of songs and everything, but I didn't realise that it would be so uncomfortable making the track. But actually, it's really epic, and it really works, and it is uncomfortable, but it's kind of set out what I intended it to do. And even though I had to go through that process myself making it, I'm really pleased that we did it that way.
Plight of a nation likened to insect migration. Families, homes and lands subject to devastation. And from one tyrannical leader, these humans travel the distance to be met with a population full of ignorance. Unloving and callous, tongues filled with malice, tearing people down further in their darkest hours. And those who are passive should rise to the challenge Open up your mind, find a way to counterbalance this inequality. Because if truth be told and truth be faced, why put up these barriers? Why implement this hierarchy like predator and carrion? If truth be told and truth be faced, why put up these barriers? Why implement this hierarchy like predator and carrion?
Okay, the very last track is in St Mary de Lode Church, which is quite near the cathedral in St Mary's Square. Some historians have claimed that it's built on the site of the earliest Christian place of worship in England. There are probably some other places in England which claim that as well. but I thought that was auspicious, just because I wanted to write a song to counter the previous song, the immigration song Strangers, which was quite dark. I wanted to counter it with a song of welcome. So I set about writing this song to be about welcoming people into our city, and how perhaps in the olden days when it was more tradition was to be hospitable. If people rocked up, you'd kind of let them in and give them some food and share the fire and keep them warm. However you could, you'd be generous with that. That was the tradition. It's not like that now. If someone knocks on your door, you don't tend to invite them in and give them food and a roof over their head. But I wanted to kind of just create something which was a counter to the ideas in the immigration song. I involved my friend Shane, who's my close collaborator when I songwrite now, and sent him some music, and he came back with some ideas. I sent him some words as well, but because he's a writer, he's more fluent with words, and he was able to kind of mold them into a more uniform shape, and then I was able to take that and edit them again. There's a lot of back and forth in the process. And then on the day I'd invited another scratch choir, so we had about 25 people, all sorts of ages and different people from around Gloucester really, that I know or people in the team knew, and we taught them the song, and we recorded the musicians. So we had a accordion player and a low whistle player and a violin player, and I played some guitar. My friend Tim played some guitar, and Tim sang the lead vocals with the group. I've decided to put, even though this comes at the end of the film, I've decided to put it as the first song on the CD, because it's a song of welcome. I think it's a really good way to start the CD. I'm really pleased with that one.